hadn't sunk in, and maybe, if she told her mother, she could make more sense of it herself. On Christmas Day, they had a wonderful lunch with Dad, her youngest brother Terry, and Danny's sister Grace, who looked after Terry and the house for Dad. Grace, who was about 40, had never married, and for the past year she had kept house at number 1. She stayed over when Dad was on night shift, so Terry wasn't alone, and Rose didn't have to worry about either of them. Grace did most of the cooking, but Rose helped, and afterwards Dad offered to help Grace clear up.
"You and Danny go for a bit of air while Lily is asleep. I'll help Grace with the dishes before all of the others arrive, and then we can settle down and listen to the Queen's speech."
Rose had been happy to leave them to it and take a walk with Danny. She was glad to have his heart, and now they had a beautiful daughter. She felt blessed. When flakes of snow started to fall, they ran back to first row hand in hand to be in time for the Christmas message, which was due to be broadcast to the nation at 3 o'clock. They opened the door to laughter and a full house. For the first time, Rose's family, the Kellys, and Danny's family, the Dodds, were all gathering together for Christmas afternoon. Rose squashed herself on the sofa in between her husband and Grace. Rose's dad and Mr. Dodd sat at the kitchen table on dining chairs. Mrs. Dodd, stouter every year that passed, took the comfy chair beside the range, and that left Stanley, Rose's elder brother, sitting beside his girlfriend, Brenda, and Terry, her younger brother, cross-legged on the rug in front of the sofa. The family connections were complicated, and it was a bit of a squeeze, but they all wanted to be together, and they didn't need a good view of the screen because the Queen was to be broadcast in sound only. Queen Elizabeth ended the speech by asking her listeners to resolve to keep the spirit of Christmas with them as they journeyed into the unknown year that lay ahead. Grace broke the silence after Queen Elizabeth finished by saying what Rose had been thinking. "What a lovely message. Though it would have been nice to see the Queen at Sandringham and see what she was wearing for Christmas Day."
"She couldn't have looked any nicer than you or Rose,"
Danny answered, giving Grace a hug. And Rose's heart melted at Grace's beam. She did look especially nice today in a new dress.
"You're right there, Danny. The ladies did us proud with their cooking too."
Dad stood up, looking flushed and animated.
"I have something to say to you all in a moment when Grace has handed you a drink."
Grace, stuck on the low sofa, was pulled to her feet by Danny. "Thanks, pet. I've got the glasses all ready." A moment later she appeared from the scullery with a tray filled with glasses of sherry. She handed one to Dad and 2 to her own Mam and Dad before bringing the tray over to Rose and the rest of them. What was going on? Mr. and Mrs. Dodd seemed as puzzled as Rose felt. Her heart thudded with apprehension. Sherry? A speech from Dad? Grace standing by him looking rosy-cheeked and in love. No, surely not. Yes, it looked that way. Was Dad going to announce an engagement? No.
"I'd like to take this opportunity to tell all of those closest to us that Grace and I—"
Dad clasped Grace's hand and smiled at her.
"Grace and I, we got married last week. We wanted it to be quiet and to keep the news for today when we're all together. So now I would like you all to raise your glasses to toast my wife, Grace Kelly."
Rose tried to paste on a smile. She mustn't make a show of herself. The room was going out of focus as though she might pass out. Lily, asleep upstairs, let out a cry, and to Rose's relief the room stopped turning and she had an excuse to leave. She dashed upstairs into the cool bedroom, held Lily to her, and took in gulps of air to stop herself from crying. How could her dad have sprung such news on her like this?